Hi and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this video we'll go through Rotomation basics and key tips to get you going with your first Rotomation. In the first video we went through key poses to help you get your first sort of lineup frames. Now in this video we'll go through our sort of in-between key poses, so we can get to sort of more accurate roto animation. So if you liked the previous video, hit that like button and sub to my channel. Every like and sub really does help, and thank you for continuing to watch my tutorials. So let's move on to the next part. So if you open up the file that you've used before on the previous one, or just if you still have it open, we'll start going through and we can just double check we're happy with our key poses. So you can just skip through the keyframes, check there's not anything doing anything crazy. We'll also check the perspective, check there's not anything crazy going on. Obviously it looks a little bit weird in perspective at the moment because we've got a lot of animation missing, but all in all it looks pretty good. So on the previous one we started on frame 1020, so it makes sense to work our way either forwards and backwards from that. So that was our sort of hero pose. So I'm going to go start doing some in-betweens or tweens, and I like to try and keep it relatively in the middle, but you can, if you just look between your keyframes, if sometimes you don't have to do anything, the animation in between will do a pretty good job of finding the tween. But in this case I'm just going to go to, and you can see it's, if we go from our frame 1020 and go to 1025, you can see that it's almost, the arms are almost back on by them, and they're on by 23, but they're coming off, they come off really fast. So it sounds like our sort of tangent is not sharp enough for that. So I'm actually going to go to my 1022, and I'm going to start my hips again. Just going to look at those. Is that? Oh yeah, I can barely see it there, sorry. I'm going to bring my hips up to roughly where the sort of short line is. Then I'm going to go through and I'm going to adjust. Luckily you don't have to adjust too much. And you can do quite a lot of this in camera, but always check your perspective for any strange movements. It's probably going to look a little bit strange in perspective in some places because it's just not the same guy, but it should look reasonable. Let's try and get this. Seems twisted somewhere down the line. Let's see if we can get that elbow in a little bit better. Cool. So I'm going to go something like that. I'm just going to look through and I'm going to go through everything. I'm not too worried about the shoulders because I don't think they're ever really going to fit too well. But we can get this head looking fairly good. Let's get our feet. The feet are not quite on the ground. There is a little button here for R where you can do the toe roll. If you want to do that as well, you can, because it automatically toe rolls with this ankle joint, so it can actually be quite annoying that it does it. So you might have to just select the little R and bring it down. So now we're just going to check our joints. Possibly a little bit over. Just going around and doing fine tweaks on every joint that you've keyframed on. Cool, so now if we scrub through our frame range from 1022 to 25, it looks pretty good. We still may need to add some extra keyframes in. So we want to try and avoid keyframing every frame, but sometimes you just don't really have much of a choice. So I'm just going to go to this frame here, push that arm in ever so slightly. Just going to have a look at this feet. If you end up keyframing too many frames, you could end up with a jittery animation, which will be worse than yeah, it'll make it a lot worse than you want. So I'm probably gonna just put some extra keyframes on the hands, because they seem to be the ones that are kind of coming off the most. But only slightly. Looks alright. Just the feet. But generally most of it's staying really nicely within our key poses, which is why it's really important to get your key poses nice and tight, because then this is the less work you'll have to do like this. So even though it's not really that much, I'm doing small tiny adjustments to the hands. Most of this, because it's only small ones, we can get away with doing most. We can focus a lot of our time in the camera view, because we know our key poses are pretty good. Because you want to focus, you want to make sure your perspective, you check your perspective mostly on your key poses, because that's where you're going to get the largest amount of your animation from. But you do want to kind of check it fairly often, to be honest. It just means if you can trust your key poses, it means that you can spend more time in camera view. But to always check your perspective, let's just keep it as that. You can cool. So that was fairly quick. If we zoom out, we just go for 2. And we see we got a fairly good result. It's not perfect, but with the rig that we have, we've got a pretty good result actually, to be honest. So let's actually go through and do we won't do 26, we'll go through to 27 and do the same thing again. I want to try and get the middle ground of the animation first. Just going to pull the waist up, bring it up to the sort of waistline. Then I'll check the feet. And you see his ankles are quite high, and you see his arching heads. He's on his tiptoes here, so be careful of that, because he's doing jumping jacks. You might miss that he's not actually, his feet aren't actually flat on the ground at the moment. It's always good to keep an eye out on that. We'll just check his feet are on the ground. Let's bring this down a little bit more. Cool. Let's bring this. I think there's any rotations for the knees, which is quite frustrating. You can't turn the knees out. Let's try one of these. Is it? Oh, no, it's not what I want. I guess it's kind of close, but we don't really want to be doing that too much. Cool. So we've got our feet. Our feet are on the ground and everything's lining up nicely. It's in our knee position. It's kind of coming off, but I think it's just the nature of the body. So now we'll just pull this hand into position. So it's in the same position. So we're keeping this elbow in the correct place. And then we sort of get this palm. It's a lot of blur here, but we can sort of see where the wrist is. We'll do the same to this arm. Just always make sure every adjustment we're getting our joints in. That's probably more important than actually getting the fitting. If this was a really good matching mesh, if you got the joints in, it would match really well. So we need to rotate our chest a tiny bit. Come forward. Now let's look at this head control. Cool. Hands, I'm not too worried about the fingers. See his fingers curling around, but let's not worry about that. Cool, so we've done our second in between. And you can see on this one, it's not perfectly on, but it was way closer than the first section. So you can see we actually don't have to do much adjustment. If we look at the hands are staying in quite well. It's just if your key poses are good, it's just going to need minor adjustments. So we'll just go through and adjust those slightly. It's probably more of the toe roll here. And as we go up the body, we'll just check our knees are in the correct place. Our hips are lined up with the waist. We'll just slightly move the hand in. And we're barely moving this, really. We'll get that head in place. So notice there's something funny going on here. Oh, it's because we haven't done that yet. So see our sort of stomach is doing something a bit funky. So even though this is moving, this is probably, we need to fix that. So we'll just select the waist. So we've not done as many keyframes on the waist. So just make a keyframe there. We can skip between the two. Let's see if it's still jumping quite a lot. Now see that pop on the stomach's kind of reduced quite a lot. We still got another one here, so it's following the waistline, but I think it's just the shorts are riding up. So well, we're doing the feet. So let's just go through and finish these feet off. Slightly in, rotate a tiny bit, as it was very small movements now. Even if you might not even have to move anything. So even that, they look quite good there. I don't need to keyframe anything. Hands not so good. That should be relatively easy to fix. I'll just go for keyframe by keyframe at this point. Pull the arm out. Up. Cool. So now if we look at that, is this hand here, we're going to focus on getting that right for these keyframes. That looks alright. So let's do the other hand, because we're still going to have to do more refinement on it near the end. But the closer we can get it now, the easier that will be. It's really looking up there. I can't get that on the head rotation, so I'm going to have to bring it on the chest. Refine the hands. Just continue this. And here. Cool. So we've done the hands for these frames, now let's just do the head. I think the head's pretty good as it is. I think that keyframe that we added on there is probably just make sure we don't so we're adding extra keyframes, and we've got to be extra careful that we're not adding any problems into it. See these, as if we hide our control reference, you can see these tassels, and they can be quite off-putting because they're flopping up and down. So don't look at those and rely on any of those. So this is still this is still a very basic, just intro to Rotomation. So it's just so you can get the idea and just get going with it. Cool, so if we go back, we just go for that tutorial. And I'm quite happy with that. If first, let's actually have a look at those feet. We're looking through. Kind of come off there. Might have missed that keyframe. Let's do the toe roll. Yeah, so looking at that, I'm quite happy with that. Let's see if you can see it a little bit closer. See, there's still a lot of refinement that needs doing with it, so don't worry if it's not perfect. It's just to get practice. So now we'll just start going through the backwards. Going backwards, sorry. And you can see it kind of, if we're looking at our arms again, our feet are generally pretty good. It's mostly our arms that are going off quite a lot. And it's the same thing. They seem to come on quite nicely near the end, but they instantly come off at frame 1019. So if we go to frame 1018, let's see if we can fix that. We'll start with our waist. We can see it's way off at the moment. So let's bring that down. We want to make sure you go from keyframe to keyframe, that you're not changing your alignment. We'll make sure you're changing the right key as well. See, on frame it's not quite perfectly on, so it's actually a little bit above. So if it's not perfect, just make sure it's consistently off. Let's get that head in. Let's try and get this hand. That seems to work pretty well. It's a shame that the skinning on the elbows is not fantastic, but it doesn't matter, I don't think. Maybe we can fix that by rotating that a little bit. Oops. So that's not so bad. Let's look at the head. Head's not far off. Tilt it back. Bring in our chest. Cool, so we got that. Let's look at our feet now. Our feet are pretty good throughout. We have not had to do huge amounts of changes. That's why if you can find a point of contact with the floor, it's always going to be your most accurate representation. I think on this rig, the angle of your knees are driven by your waist, so see that there. Let's not worry too much. Ooh. Let's get that head back on. Oh, let's just look through those frames. Something funny going on with the knee here. I think I pulled that down enough. better. So, still popping in that middle bit, so let's go through it and keyframe it again. I think that's actually alright there, it's just that keyframe it doesn't like. Delete that, that seems to have gone a bit funny. If that's alright. So don't be afraid to delete keyframes if you've gone wrong somewhere. Like, I think I might have just posed that a little bit wrong there. This keyframe seems good. So we'll just... Cool. The amount of times that I've done things and you go through and you just completely delete all of it, it's absolutely fine, it happens. Cool, so we'll just go through. I think he is. It's a gyro. Rotation of the hips and chest. So when you get strange movements like this, you've got to kind of try and figure out where they come from, which can be extremely difficult sometimes. Whether it comes from a rotation of the hips or the rotation of the chest. I think that'll be right. We're not looking for an absolutely skin tight track, we just want to get you going. So let's look at these feet. Let's just go through and so sort of come up, flatten out. I think most of the time, a lot of these feet up, a lot of the time his feet are on his toes. So you might get slipping where it looks like his feet's not on the ground, but it's actually you just need to do the sort of coming off his tiptoes and rolling his feet back. Fix the toe curl. Cool. So got something going on here that might be a little bit off. Let's try and figure out why these knees not fitting. Okay. tiny bit forward, bring his knees in. Don't want to do that. Delete that. Let's try and figure out why that knee's coming off. It doesn't help with this rig, to be honest. There must be a way that I can rotate and hide the geometry. Maybe I've missed something in this. Oh, it's letting me do it now. Okay, so okay, there, can move the knees. It just wasn't letting me earlier. So let's go through and check all these knee points. Very strange. Okay, so it doesn't. You can move the knee as long as it's not completely hyperextended. So could possibly mean I might have to fix some points of my feet. So I'm just going to go through and any points that are kind of wildly off. To be able to bend the knee out, I have to make sure it's not completely extended, which kind of makes sense, I guess. So I'm just going to go through and refine this left foot so I can bring this knee out. Okay, cool. My bad, I didn't realize that worked, but it's probably because I was pushing the leg bit too far away through the IK. So cool, that's much better. So let's do the same for the right leg. I just thought that control didn't work, but it was me doing it wrong. So it's always good to get to know your rigs. Probably should have spent a little bit more time learning this one, but I guess you can just learn it as you go along. Luckily it's not a huge frame range, so we can just go through, do very small adjustments to the feet. So we can now get that knee out. It's pretty much fine most of the way through. Cool. So we're back at frame 20 again. Let's carry on with this left leg. Now we're actually at frame 15 now, so we'll do the other foot. So we'll just go through, check the feet. Mostly they're pretty good. Just the same here. Readjust these feet and this knee. Cool. You're gonna have some sort of skin wobble as well, but yeah, that looks pretty good. We're getting somewhere pretty good with the legs. So let's actually just continue all the way through and refine the legs, then we'll work. No, actually, let's just carry on as it works, because don't forget we've still got to adjust the waist on some of these keys. That comes up there. So there will be parts where you have to do more than you probably want, but luckily this is only 30 frames, so sometimes you can have shots that are like hundreds of frames and you could be spending an extremely long time, and it can get quite yeah, when you're spending that long on something like this, it can be quite heart-wrenching. And you can get quite frustrated with it very quickly. So I'm just going to go through, make sure it's sort of, obviously these shots pop up, slip up and down, so don't follow them directly, just use it all as a guide. It can be very difficult to get tight body tracks when clothing's moving around, and even skin, because obviously the skin's not solid. And you can spend much more time just trying to get through this as quick as possible. And I think our hips are pretty good for most of this now. It's like obviously muscle movement, but let's carry on with these feet. Let's see if we can get some of this in tweens, just by doing the keyframes in the middle. We can get most of these just by the in-betweens, which is quite nice. Always make sure that our knees are in the correct place. I've got a feeling that this could be the toe curl. That's making it look a bit funny. So we may as well just finish off this foot. But hopefully you're getting something out of this, even if it's not like the most perfect rotomation. It's a good, all the sort of methods are what you'll use in industry. This is exactly how you do it. If you're asked to do it, you need to block out your key poses, then refine them. I say with all rotomation tasks, your most important part of it is getting those key poses in, because it will save you a lot of time. And if you get them perfect, or near enough as close as you can get, you'll save yourself hours of work. So now we're pretty much done with that foot. We're going to move over to the screen right one, his left. And we're just going to go through and do those minor adjustments. Be careful when you're doing things keyframing at a time, because you could create more problems with jitters. If you're consistent with it, it should be fine. Something funny going on with that foot. It's quite wonky. So that's why it's always good to keep an eye on your perspective. So I hadn't looked at it in a while, and I noticed my foot's a little bit funky. So let's just go through and fix that. Oh, how's that happened? Check it's not bent on anyone, so we'll just go back through and we'll fix that again. You get it pretty close, but so it's not the same guy, so don't worry if you're not getting it absolutely perfect. We're just going through the basic fundamentals. And I guess when the body's not fitting, the most important thing you can do is keep a consistent offset of it not lining up. Don't suddenly choose different positions where it fits and doesn't. If it fits in one area, make sure it's the same throughout. Cool. So I think we've done the feet. And we're looking something pretty good. We've obviously got some. We can see there's something funny going on with the chest here. Even though it's not going to fit, we can still try and get it. So it looks like it. Something here. So it's definitely something with the chest here. Oop. Obviously, we can't really follow his nipples because they're moving up with his arms, so I think we'll probably have to leave that because there's no controls for it. So we'll move onto his arms. And we'll just go through and we're going to refine. In fact, the next thing we'll do is the head, because the head is pretty much governed by the chest. And if we can get, we might be able to get some of the arms in with the chest. So just gonna, definitely a problem frame there. So it can be quite dangerous to do lots of keyframes, because now I'd have to do this over all the other ones. Or you can do it in animation layers. Luckily, I think it's just a... I think that'll be fine. So let's go back to the head. Because we're in the refining stage, we can get away with some extra keyframes. We're not trying to line the eyes up perfectly at the moment, we just want to make sure we get that head in. So way too far forward there. It's hard to see sometimes. You can just about see the forehead. And luckily it looks pretty good with all our tweens there. So let's select the head. It's in there somewhere. Let's see if we can. You can't. It's not be translating the head. You can move it slightly, but you shouldn't really need to. Cool, so if you look at that, I've still got this wavy bit. I think probably a twist from the shoulders. Do that. Let's see if we can get this from the hips actually. Obviously this is going to throw our arms off, but you will find a lot of rotomation and body tracking can be a lot of backwards and forwards, so don't worry about that. And especially when you're starting off with this, you're going to go backwards and forwards a lot. Probably. You might not. You might be absolutely amazing at it. I forgot to mention, I'm just kind of using key points. Like most of the time I'm just using the joints, and if your joints are working pretty well, everything will work pretty well. But I am still using sort of marks on his body, some of his tattoos, to give me a good idea of what's going on. I don't think we're going to be able to get that chest bit because it's obviously it's wobbling around way too much. We can give it a good go there. We can try and remove that wobble. Just by using the position of his. Let's zoom out and have a look. That looks much better. It's still there, but like I say, this is going to be your first roto, so don't worry too much about it. You're going to get better with practice. You'll get better, and if you have better rigs, you'll get much better results. So the more accurate your rig is, and well, how accurate your geometry is, and how good your rig is, it kind of does determine your RotoAnim quite a lot. But you can still do pretty good RotoAnim with kind of not so great rigs and models. We're not doing too bad here. It could definitely be a lot worse. But I just hope you guys are sort of getting the sort of... I know this is quite long, but hopefully you're getting the grasp of... hopefully by the time you get to this point, you're like, yeah, I kind of understand, and you can sort of go by yourself and give it a go. But I don't really want to go too much into the reasons why things need rotomating. I just kind of assume that because you're here, you kind of know exactly why you need to do it. It's quite a sort of niche thing. Not really many people understand it or know it, and not many people can actually really do it, because it's not like animating really. You are animating, but animating is extremely difficult. Just like animating walk cycles and stuff like that, it's really hard to look natural. This is kind of at the other end of the spectrum, whereas animation is difficult because you've got too many opinions, you've got a lot of grey area, you've got people's views and how it should be and what it should look like, and that makes it incredibly difficult. But body tracking and RotoAnim, it's sort of equally as difficult because there's no grey area and it has to be right, and there's not really opinions on it, whereas most people can see when it's wrong or right, and making it perfect can be extremely difficult and really time consuming. So I would say, to be honest, I'm not an animator, but I would probably say doing RotoAnim is on the same level as difficulty, if not more, just purely for the fact there's no grey area and it kind of has to be right, and there's too many sort of contributing factors showing where it's wrong or right, because you're just basically looking over the top. You've got your reference there, and if it's not perfect, it's not right. But luckily with RotoAnim, it doesn't always have to be perfect. It can just be rough RotoAnim. It could just be a placeholder for some animation. You say for this, there could be someone animating a dog walking in front of them. They just need to know where he is. And in that case, you don't even need to animate it. You can just have him stood there doing nothing. But that wouldn't really be much of a tutorial of me just doing a single frame lineup. So let's have a look at that. Did I just move that then by accident? So let's have a look at him. Cool. I think that's pretty, like, we could spend a long time refining this. Like, we've got some pops here. Like, I know there's pops there. It's not that I don't really want to spend. And I think at this point in time, you probably know how to fix them. And instead of just watching me go through and fix my mistakes, you may not have even had these problems. You may have just done it and got some really nice poses, and it worked straight away. So yeah, I think we're pretty much done for your like first basic RotoAnim. I think we're pretty much done with this now. So don't forget to save it, and we can do another one. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.